Hey everyone, this is Julia with episode number 80 of the Mixology Talk podcast. Well, it's time to come clean. I've been keeping a secret. Yep, it's true. Chris and I are expecting a mini mixologist to join our family in October. I am pregnant.
What? Why didn't you tell me?
So what does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things. First of all, it means I've been smelling a lot of cocktails recently, and unfortunately, well, fortunately in some ways, not drinking very many or any at all. It also means that we planned a trip to Chicago as a little bit of a getaway before the baby comes. While we were in town, we decided, what the heck, let's go visit the Aviary bar and see what they're up to. It's one of the best bars in the world. They've got an amazing cocktail program, and so we thought we'd pay them a visit. While we were there, we were amazed. There were so many things that they did that I think were great examples for our industry and great examples for anybody working behind the bar. So we thought, what the heck? Let's go ahead and do a podcast episode to go over some of the things that we learned while we were there that might be beneficial for other folks to hear. Check out the show notes at mixologytalk.com/80 and let's get started. The first thing about our aviary experience that really blew me away happened long before we actually walked in the door, and that was being accommodating for my pregnancy. When I looked at their website, I was really excited about doing the cocktail and food pairing. A friend of mine had recommended it, and I knew that Chris would absolutely love it. But probably didn't make a lot of sense for me to go ahead and drink 5 cocktails in a row.
Yeah, and you were telling me during the whole experience of like the reservation and, you know, getting us booked and all that, they made you feel very confident about there's not going to be any alcohol in the cocktail, and they made it a point to make sure that was part of our reservation and experience after all.
Absolutely, and even more than I expected. What I reached out to them and I sent them an email to see if it was possible for me to just get a half of the tasting menu, for me to just get the food portion.
The only ones that had that exception, because I remember hearing something along the lines of, we have another, or this one as well, or something along those lines of, this reservation
somebody
has a
else
non-alcoholic guest as well.
I'm glad to hear I wasn't the only one.
Yeah, I mean, and the way they executed it, they did it very well, so it almost makes me think that, you know, this is something that's kind of in their normal
We can't have been the
day-to-day.
first ones. Absolutely
Right.
not. And actually, part of the reason I even thought to email them was that the friend of mine who'd recommended the pairing menu has quite a few dietary restrictions. It's a couple, and he's gluten-free and she's vegetarian. And so she said they were accommodating for them, and that's part of the reason that they recommended this for us. So again, I think adds to the experience, absolutely, but also I think you're going to get more customers that way, and even more so, by the way, I paid full price.
Right. So the
and I was
markup's there.
happy to do it.
Yeah.
And there was no alcohol in my pairing whatsoever. So they definitely made some money, and I was more than happy to pay for it because the experience was just over and above.
Well, and I think we're probably shooting ahead a little bit, but I will say that the cocktails that you were given were not light. I mean, they had so much flavor and so much texture, and they were absolutely fantastic that they were good enough to stand on their own.
Yeah, it was not just a bunch of non-alcoholic mojitos. Absolutely. I think the one big thing that I took away, which I'm definitely going to be leveraging in my own non-alcoholic cocktails, is actually the use of verjus.
Yeah, I want to say there was in like 2 or 3 of your
Several.
cocktails out of 5, right?
Mm-hmm. And
like
it was a really great flavor. I won't say it added an alcohol flavor, but it definitely added that sort of aromatic quality, that almost spice. You really have a hard time adding to a non-alcoholic cocktail. Non-alcoholic cocktails are almost always very heavy on mixer, very heavy on fruit, very heavy on sweetness. But they managed to, certainly some of their cocktails were a little bit on the sweet side. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you know I don't mind that one bit. But they also did a good job of really having some savory options as well. And I think that was thanks to the verjus and once again spoke to the skill of the team.
Absolutely. I was extremely impressed, not only on all the cocktails, but the fact that they executed a non-alcoholic food pairing so well. I mean, they really were able to kind of demonstrate their skills and their talent behind the bar.
Yeah, I had to keep stealing my cocktails back from Chris.
And there were quite a few of yours that I actually preferred.
I
not
know.
To say that
you kept stealing them from me.
not to say that they were, any better or anything like that, but just my preference. There were some really fantastic ones.
I will say yours smelled delicious.
They were pretty tasty.
So the next thing that I wanted to mention was the experience started outside. I think a lot of folks think about the guest experience as the moment the guest walks in the door, but it actually starts before that. It starts the moment somebody sees your sign from a distance. If you're in a place where folks drive, it starts when people are finding a parking spot. It starts when people are making a reservation. And so I think that's something worth thinking about. When we arrived at Aviary, I think they did a really great job of the sort of guest welcoming stage.
Yeah.
They had a nice patio where folks were outside enjoying cocktails. There's a gentleman outside in he must have been a 3-piece suit. Very well dressed. He knew exactly what his role was. We told him our name. He stepped inside, checked with the host, and called our name when our time was ready. But it was beautifully executed.
Yeah, and it's really well done, and they made you feel very comfortable when you're out there. And they knew what the surroundings looked like, and they received us really well. It was a really amazing kind of first impression that we had with them, and we felt very confident and comfortable right away.
But I would say not just comfortable, but also it felt fancy.
Yeah, it did.
And I think that's also important because something we're going to talk about in a moment, if you're going to charge a lot for your cocktails, they're almost priming you for that.
Right.
When you walk up to the door and they make you feel like a VIP, you're going to be a little bit less put off by the prices when you actually see the menu in a moment.
Yeah, and then one of the things that I noticed, and I've noticed in a couple of different bars, especially when it comes to like tiki bars, is one thing they do really well there is they really seclude you from the outside world. So when you're inside that bar or inside that setting, you lose all sense of reality. You are there and you're present, and it's all about that experience. They kind of cut you off from the outside world. It's a pretty cool experience.
I felt like that Aviary did that as well, and they did it well. I mean, when your name is called, you are actually waiting outside. You're not waiting in an interior sitting room. And so the moment you walk in the door, your experience begins, and you are walked to your table. And so I think they did a really, really good job of that, and it really helped emphasize that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, one of the other things that we notice almost immediately is this is one of the best bars in the world. You hear their name come up all the time.
That's why we were there.
And we were very, very happy to be there. The other thing that we notice is that when you carry that level of prestige, you can also charge accordingly. This is something that we both noticed.
Right. I don't remember exactly what we paid for our tasting menu. I want to say it was about $150, something like that, for a 5-course tasting menu with paired cocktails. And looking at the actual a la carte menu, the cocktails were between $19 and $30 each.
Right. So they're not cheap.
In fact, I would say they're probably the most expensive cocktails I've ever seen, with the exception of a rum and coke I had at a Vegas nightclub once. I think that might have been like $35.
But I wouldn't put that on par with Aviary.
The experience was not quite the same.
But just to kind of put that into perspective, though, they have thought through every single process along the way from the moment they receive you to when you leave. And they put that kind of care into every single one of their cocktails as well. So you're not just paying for an ounce and a half of rum or anything like that. You're paying for all the thought, all the expertise, everything that went into designing that cocktail.
And designing that experience. I think that's the point, is that you're going to hear throughout this episode, is that it's not about the liquid and the taste of the liquid in your mouth.
Right.
I think sometimes we as an industry get really focused on the taste, which yes, absolutely is important, but there's so much more you can do.
Right.
And in this case, for example, you're paying for the expertise of the chef and mixologist. You're paying for the skill of the folks who were actually making the crazy drinks and apparatuses involved. You're paying for the fact that when a drink is set down in front of you, there's a interactive element to it that somebody has thought through. And I think in a lot of cases, they had bespoke glassware. They had custom designed, I don't know what to call them, gadgets?
Presentations. Yeah, I mean,
Statues?
There's something that looks like, and a lot of people may actually already have a visual picture of this in their head, of this canteen, basically, that's all glass, and they stuff it full of herbs, and they fill it full of liquids. It's
reminds
kind of the quintessential Aviary cocktail that, is so famous.
Right. It's almost like a diorama where you can see all of the herbs inside infusing, and as you drink, the more sips that you have, the longer it steeps, the more the flavor changes.
Right. So they've added a lot of that style of glass where they've really put a lot, either designed it with a production company or really sought after this stuff.
But I am absolutely certain that they had their glassware, probably, if not all, most of it, custom made for them. And this is just one more example of something it's a little bit of a catch-22, I suppose. You know, if you provide that level of experience, you can charge more money. But on the other hand, you may need that price point to be able to provide that level of experience.
Right.
So maybe
absolutely.
that speaks to the type of investors you need for this kind of an establishment. But I think that there's definitely an opportunity there to just think outside the liquid, think outside the taste. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's the experience? And I think there's an opportunity there to charge more if you're providing a more comprehensive experience for the guest.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, every single detail of that experience was totally dialed. Everything from the plates that were served, you know, the silverware that they chose, and something that I noticed throughout the entire night was their ice program. Their ice program is by far one of the best that I've ever seen. It is the best that I've ever seen. And they had different ice for different cocktails, and it was really impressive to see them execute ice at this level. Is really cool to see.
I would agree with that completely. I think this is sort of the next key point is just don't overlook your ice. There wasn't a single cocktail where ice had been overlooked and, you know, there's just whatever ice in the glass. I mean, the water glasses had clear block ice in them. Mm-hmm. There were cases where there were things frozen in the ice. There were cases where, for example, I don't recall what kind of cocktail was, perhaps a variation on old fashioned, but it had been frozen inside a sphere of ice, which had to be broken open to enjoy. There were several scenarios where different flavors had been frozen into the ice such that the drink would change flavor once the ice had melted.
Yeah.
There's so much that they had done to really take advantage of the opportunity that the ice provides.
Yeah, it was really impressive. They've just dialed in every single cocktail, and the ice was not overlooked. I mean, every little tiny detail was thought through all the way to the end. It was pretty impressive to see that.
I think on a similar note, I would say have some fun with it. I liked this one because I think that when we get in the mindset of, you know, Michelin-starred restaurants and really high-end bars, I think folks tend to take things really, really seriously. Mm-hmm. But I will say throughout our experience, I felt like I just got this sense that not only was the cocktail designer, the chef, mixologist, thinking creatively and having some fun and playfulness in the drinks he was creating, but it also created a playfulness for the server who was serving the drink and for the guest who was actually consuming it. My favorite, I have to say, was there was a cocktail served in a glass bottle with a glass boat inside.
Yeah,
that was my favorite.
Amazing.
It just, goodness knows how they clean it. That's the one thing I would love to know. If anybody who works at the Aviary is listening, please reply and let me know how you clean that one, because I just have no idea.
Yeah, you've heard the term a boat in a bottle. This is like a glass boat in a glass bottle.
With a cocktail inside.
So it looks like this, almost like a ghost ship inside this bottle. It was beautiful. The presentation was off the charts.
But it was so fun.
Yeah,
I think.
it was. It was a good time.
You could tell that they weren't taking themselves super, super seriously with every single drink. I mean, certainly they take the technique and skill and presentation seriously, but they're having some fun with the way they did it, and I appreciate that. No,
absolutely. And this carried over to, as we've already mentioned, a lot of the presentation almost always had a really cool interactive portion to it. It had some fun. The gadgets that they use are kind of all over the place. It makes it a lot more entertaining and kind of what having a cocktail in a room full of friends should be like. You know, it's like, oh, look at that. That's really cool. Oh, my God, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. The two tables next to us were, I don't think they knew each other upon arrival, but they knew each other well by the time they left. Although after the number of cocktails they had, I highly doubt they will remember knowing each other. But every drink that they got, the other table would turn and say, oh, let me see. How does it work? And they became fast friends, bonding over this like crazy drink experience. It was so fun to see that and to just see their delight at what they were getting. And well, certainly we were ogling their cocktails too. So,
and it was kind of infectious. It was happening all over the place. You know, when somebody got a cocktails, because they were all staged at different times, and you kind of see a bunch of other people around you that whenever somebody would present a cocktail, you're like, oh, wow, what was that? That was cool. Oh, did you see this, that, and the other? And
yeah, do you see what's happening over there? There was one that I have no idea how they did it, but basically there was a aroma inside of a glass bag, which they cut open and you breathe in to experience the aroma right before you take your first sip of the drink.
Right.
Holy cow, who thinks of this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It was pretty neat.
Yeah, and I mean, all this kind of stuff, like, it really makes you be present and in that moment, because there's so many interesting things happening all around you. Great conversation pieces, great cocktails. You know, the food was absolutely fantastic. One thing that I remember with the pork rinds, they were absolutely delicious.
Those were really good. Yeah. I will attest to that.
Right. So everything was absolutely fantastic.
And I would say that kind of brings us to our next point, and which you're starting to hear us talk a lot about this now, and that is showmanship. That is the experience, the sort of interactive element. One thing I really, really liked was I don't think there was a single cocktail that just appeared at the table finished.
No, there was always a kind of an interactive piece to the drinks.
Yeah, at the very least, the server would do something in front of you. Mm-hmm. But at the most, you would be actually brought into the experience. For example, you would have to breathe in the aroma from the plastic bag. Or you would need, there was one, the cocktail frozen inside of an ice ball. It's the guest that actually cracks open the ball. They have a little, I don't know how to describe it, little apparatus with the rubber band where you pull up the rubber band and let go and it cracks open the ice ball and it breaks open your glass and it's just beautiful. But the waiter didn't do it. They had the guest do it.
And there was quite a few that, or there was one in particular that I remember, they would bring it to you and they would leave it in front of you, but you couldn't drink it. It had to actually steep for a couple of minutes.
That's just me.
I know, right? But, you know, there's always this piece, this showmanship, like Julia said, this presentation piece that is part of that experience and part of the cocktail that was really fascinating and fun and different. I remember one of my favorites was, and this really kind of like made me want to try and figure this out. I believe it was a pineapple like circle that was sitting in the edge of a glass, and it's really hard to describe, but it's like a rocks glass with a pineapple kind of sitting at like a 30-degree angle, creating this almost vacuum around it, like sealing the bottom of the glass from the top. And then above the pineapple was like crushed ice. And
it wasn't a piece of pineapple. It was a pineapple.
It was like dehydrated pineapple kind of put into a disc form almost, or something like that. And the really interesting thing about it was as the server poured it over, it had enough weight and substance to it to hold the ice up. But the minute it started to touch liquid, it dissolved and then the ice kind of crashed down through it. And whatever that pineapple piece was, or the orange piece that was in the glass, almost completely dissolved. And it was like, wow, that was really an interesting idea. I've never thought about that. That's fun.
It's like a really magic trick.
It really is. Yeah.
It was really neat. I like that one a lot. I also noticed another one where I don't remember exactly how it worked, but there was one more cocktail that I appreciated where the glassware itself had a straw that attached to the bottom of the glass, and the guest was asked to blow into that straw to mix up the drink, where the bubbles would go through and actually mix the drink as a part of the experience. So I thought that was kind of fun. I thought that was kind of creative, because as a kid, you're never allowed to blow into your drink.
Yeah, that's true. There's so many, like every single cocktail that we saw, that we experienced that night, they all had this element to it. And it's one of their themes and kind of their cocktail menu. It runs everywhere, and it's really impressive to see.
Absolutely. Sort of our second to last thought here is I will say, in a flight setting, like the setting we had with 5 cocktails in a row, it was a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, I didn't finish any of my cocktails.
And thankfully so, because I'll tell you right now, Sunday morning wasn't pretty either way.
That was rough. Yeah, I will say that Sunday morning was a lot of rough. Water. But to Julia's point, these were 5 full-size cocktails, full octane, as far as I could tell, and they didn't skimp. And they were all amazing, and it was great to let them kind of change temperatures or change how much water got diluted or the other ice diluted into it. It was really fascinating to see kind of their evolution happen. But
it's just a lot of booze.
It's a lot of booze. I mean, there's no way I could have done anything after that. I think we did. but I shouldn't have.
Do you remember?
Actually, I don't
Hardly.
remember a lot.
But I will also say the pairing menu, the portions were very small. It was more of an appetizer, maybe a tapas style or
Right.
size, I should say, of dish. So I don't want to take this as a critique, because I think I certainly understand the Aviary's position, and certainly the cost justified the sizing they chose. But I think if you are somebody who doesn't have a very big alcohol tolerance, you could be in bad shape.
Yeah, they could probably be carrying you out of that bar. And this is something that Julia kind of touched on, and I will absolutely agree with, is the food size portion is very, very small. There's not a lot of protein on the plate, in my opinion. So you don't have anything to really... Well, not that protein will absorb alcohol, but there's nothing to kind of coat the stomach and
Right.
really kind of soak up any of that alcohol. So you're going to feel all 5 cocktails.
So maybe go out for like one of those $2 slices of pizza beforehand.
Chicago deep dish.
There you go.
But, you want to really be able to enjoy the experience. Just be a little bit, maybe advance warning.
Yeah, and I think that the lesson here is, I think, just to sort of think proactively about your alcohol portions. I think if we were talking about a purely a la carte setting, like a traditional bar setting where folks can order as many cocktails as they want, this isn't such a big deal because folks can stop when they're ready. But if you're going to offer a flight, if you're going to offer a pairing menu, you may want to think about this. It may be worth considering downsizing your cocktails slightly just to make it a little bit more crowd pleasing. I mean, I think Chris doesn't have a terrible alcohol tolerance, and it got him good. So
Yeah.
I will say the table next to us was doing
Just fine.
just
Yeah.
fine by the end of the evening. I think the lady tried to break into the bar next door at one point.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were having a
They were
great
having
time.
a great time.
But yeah, it was something that was one of my biggest takeaways. Was I appreciated every single one of the cocktails, and I would have loved all of them, and probably even a few more, but they were too much to drink for one person.
Yeah, I almost got the sense that you felt a little bit guilty because you couldn't finish and you wanted to.
A little piece of me died inside, yeah.
So given the cost, I kind of see where they're coming from, and especially because all of the 5 cocktails in the pairing menu were actually offered a la carte, and given the presentation, given the experience, it might be quite challenging for them to downsize. So it's just something to consider, and I'm sure they have, but we definitely felt as though we could use a slice of pizza afterwards and a
Yeah.
whole bunch of water.
Right, absolutely. So one last thing that I really remember, and I think that really stood out to me, is that they had an open concept kitchen. And by open concept, I mean you could see everything. And their bar is not a bar at all. It is more of a kitchen than a bar. It runs as a kitchen. They call out their cocktails like a kitchen. It is very highly regimented, and it was really impressive. And you can actually sit there and watch them create it in kind of a ringside seat. On their way out, we got a chance to sit there, and I just was amazed at their preparation, their execution.
We were there for a while.
Yeah, we were probably there for about 20, 30 minutes just watching them
And it was
maneuver through service.
one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, and it was just amazing to see it. And for anybody that's really interested in it, this may be something that you can have a conversation with a reservationist when you put in your reservation, because you will need one, is they have a private table inside of the kitchen.
I was so bummed when I saw that because I didn't even know that was a thing to ask for, and I totally would have.
Right. And so, if you're really into cocktails, if you're into craft cocktails and you really want to take an amazing experience even to the next level, that might be something to consider. I'm sure it's not free. I'm sure it's a premium spot.
I'm sure it's worth it. It was
You were literally inside the kitchen.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I saw the chef come by, and he would come and chat with folks and ask what they thought of things. It was amazing.
Yeah, and they would get cocktails that I didn't see anywhere else on the floor. So they're very, very hands-on and, made it special for them. It was really great to see that. And talk about a special evening. I'm sure that was, we had an amazing time. But I'm sure if you were able to sit in that kitchen and watch the team execute service, that's got to be a nice treat.
Pretty exceptional. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And I will say that we did not get to go to their other bar. I think that's downstairs.
The library? Is that
Library
what it's
or
called?
something? Yeah. The Office, I think it is.
Office.
But I'm okay with that because I don't think I could have used another drink.
I could tell you right now that we went to that bar and you would believe me.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you remember.
I would have to, yeah. I'd have to hear the stories.
I could make up something good. So I think the last thought that I wanted to close off is to just, as being in our industry, I think it's risky. I think you can go to a place like the Aviary and you can really let your knowledge color your experience. It's kind of like a magician going to a magic show and not enjoying it so much because they spend the whole time wondering how the magic tricks work or trying to pick them apart. I think that being in the industry, we know some of the stuff that happens behind the curtain, but it's important to still appreciate the skill and the technique and talent that goes into the experience.
Yeah, and for me, one of the best things that I really enjoyed was seeing the interaction and seeing the people's reaction when they got their cocktails and seeing like their amazement. And I mean, I was amazed as well, but just being able to see all these people respond in this way to a cocktail was pretty inspiring and pretty, it was cool to see that to live that and to see it through their eyes as well.
I couldn't agree more. And I think sometimes I see in our industry, we'll have, for example, somebody will be very, very skilled at cocktail creation and craft cocktails, and they'll go to a high-end bar and will almost have sort of a negative outlook about it because perhaps they thought that, well, everybody says bar X is the best bar ever, and then an expert goes in and he says, well, it's not as good as mine or something like that. Don't let it color your experience like that. And I'm not saying that this is exactly the experience we had. I guess what I'm just trying to say is I think that in situations like this at the Aviary, at craft cocktail bars, really high-end bars, I think the best way to appreciate it is to see it through the eyes of the public.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I know over time that I've not really put into consideration, but I think that is really important, is imagine the entire experience on the other side of the bar and really deliver and execute and craft it in that way. I think if I would have kept that in front of mine, it would have changed a lot of the ways I presented cocktails, designed cocktails, with that focus of always being in front of the guest. I think that's a really critical thing that I really brought back the importance to me.
Because I think at the end of the day, the folks who are designing cocktails for Aviary aren't doing it for us. They aren't doing it for the best folks in the industry. They aren't doing it for the cocktail nerds out there, for the people who, for some unknown reason, decided to start a podcast to talk about cocktails. They are doing it for the public, and for the public to have an unbelievably out there experience that's so different from anything they've ever had. And I think that's the way to appreciate it, is to see that and really enjoy it through their eyes, and don't let yourself get caught up in negativity of, well, I can see how they did that, or, oh, I could do that at home. Yeah, you probably could, and that's pretty cool. We're all nerds here, I get it. But I think that's not the point.
Right, and I will say that the experience for me was absolutely next level. I mean, all of it was just so well executed. I hold them in the highest regards. I think they're true professionals. Their cocktails were absolutely amazing. Their presentation was legendary.
And we will be back when I can drink cocktails again.
So, for all the crew over there at Aviary, I'm sure you're not listening to this silly little podcast, but thank you for an amazing experience. And it will always be one of my fond memories of our industry experiences.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So there you have it, a few takeaways from our amazing experience at Aviary. If you're ever in Chicago, I do highly recommend getting a reservation for the cocktail pairing. It's definitely worth it. And go ahead, send them an email. See if you can get that table in the prep area or kitchen. It's such a good view. I think you'll definitely appreciate it. I did also want to let you know we are starting to book interviews for the podcast in the coming weeks. So definitely look forward to that. We should be having some great podcast guests coming on, and you can look forward to a couple more interesting perspectives than just hearing from Chris and I every week. So we'll definitely catch you next time. Check out the show notes at mixologytalk.com/80, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Cheers!
Never miss an episode by subscribing in iTunes or YouTube. And as always, check out the show notes by clicking on the right.